Good evening and welcome. Today we're tackling a critical question at the intersection of environmental policy and economics. Should governments actively support the adoption of green technologies like electric cars and solar panels through financial subsidies? With us to argue in favor is Dr. Lena Hansen, an environmental scientist renowned for her work on climate change mitigation strategies. She believes subsidies are essential tools to accelerate our transition to a sustainable future. Presenting the counter-argument is Mr. David Chen, a respected economist specializing in market analysis and public finance. Mr. Chen contends that such subsidies can distort markets and may not be the most efficient use of public resources. We'll begin with opening statements from each speaker, followed by a moderated discussion and rebuttal period, and conclude with closing remarks. Dr. Hansen, please begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Isabel. The climate crisis presents an undeniable and urgent threat to our planet and way of life. We are running out of time to make the significant changes needed to limit global warming and its catastrophic consequences. Transitioning rapidly to sustainable energy sources and cleaner transportation is not merely an option, it's an absolute necessity. However, many crucial green technologies, like electric vehicles and solar installations, face initial hurdles. These hurdles often include higher upfront costs compared to established fossil fuel technologies and inertia within existing markets. This is precisely where government subsidies play a vital role. They act as catalysts, accelerating the adoption curve for these essential technologies. Subsidies help bridge the cost gap, making green options more accessible and attractive to consumers and businesses alike. But the benefits extend far beyond individual adoption. These subsidies generate significant positive externalities, societal benefits that the free market often fails to adequately value. Every electric car replacing a petrol one, every solar panel installed, contributes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, combating climate change directly. Furthermore, they lead to cleaner air in our cities, reducing respiratory illnesses and healthcare costs, a tangible improvement in public health. Investing in domestic green technology also enhances our energy security and independence, reducing reliance on volatile global fossil fuel markets. Economically, these subsidies are not just expenditures. They are strategic investments. They stimulate innovation within the green technology sector, driving research and development and improving efficiency over time. This fosters the growth of entirely new industries, creating thousands of skilled, well-paying, green jobs in manufacturing, installation, maintenance, and research. Critics often overlook that the market is already distorted. Fossil fuels have benefited from decades of implicit and explicit subsidies, and don't bear the full cost of the environmental damage they cause, a massive negative externality. Subsidies for green tech help level the playing field and correct this market failure. We have seen clear evidence globally. Targeted subsidies have been instrumental in dramatically reducing the cost of solar power and wind energy, making them competitive with, and often cheaper than, fossil fuels today. Therefore, government subsidies are not market distortions in a negative sense. They are necessary corrections and strategic investments to accelerate a vital transition, protect our environment, improve public health, and build a prosperous green economy.
Thank you, Isabel. Dr. Hansen paints a compelling picture of the environmental need, which I don't dispute. The question is about the method, not the goal. From an economic perspective, government subsidies for specific technologies like EVs and solar panels raise serious concerns. My primary objection stems from the principle of free markets. Markets, when functioning properly, are remarkably efficient at allocating capital and resources to where they are most productive. Subsidies interfere with this process. They distort market signals by artificially lowering the price of favored technologies. This can lead to a misallocation of resources, diverting investment away from potentially more efficient or innovative solutions that the market might have otherwise favored. We must also consider the significant cost to taxpayers. Subsidies are not free money. They represent substantial public expenditure. These funds have an opportunity cost. Every billion spent subsidizing electric cars is a billion not spent on improving education, funding healthcare, investing in fundamental research across various fields, or simply reducing the overall tax burden on citizens and businesses. Furthermore, there's the inherent risk of governments picking winners. Do government agencies truly possess the foresight and information to identify which specific technologies will be the most effective or cost-efficient in the long run? History suggests this is often not the case. Bureaucratic decisions can be influenced by lobbying and political factors, potentially propping up inefficient companies or technologies that wouldn't survive on their own merits, creating unfair competitive advantages. This also raises questions of fairness and equity. Subsidies for products like electric vehicles often disproportionately benefit higher-income households who can afford the initial, albeit reduced, purchase price. Meanwhile, the cost of these subsidies is typically borne by the entire taxpayer base, including those who may never directly benefit. Is that a fair distribution? Instead of picking specific technological winners through subsidies, I advocate for broader, market-based solutions that are technology neutral. The most economically efficient approach is to directly address the externality Dr. Hansen mentioned, the cost of pollution. Implementing a carbon price, either through a carbon tax or a cap-and-trade system, forces polluters to pay for their emissions. This internalizes the environmental cost across the entire economy and allows the market, consumers, and innovators to find the most cost-effective ways to reduce emissions, whatever they may be. It doesn't favor solar over wind or EVs over hydrogen or efficiency measures over fuel switching. It simply makes emitting carbon more expensive, spurring innovation across the board. Government support should focus on funding basic research and development in green energy, letting the market decide which specific applications are viable, rather than subsidizing deployment directly. In conclusion, while the goal of a greener future is shared, subsidies are often an inefficient, costly, and potentially unfair tool that interferes with market mechanisms.
Thank you both for those clear, opening statements. Dr. Hansen, Mr. Chen raises concerns about the substantial cost to taxpayers and the risk of government backing the wrong technologies. How do you respond to the argument that these subsidies might be an inefficient use of public funds compared to, say, a carbon tax?
That's a valid concern, Isabel, but I see subsidies not as mere costs, but as crucial investments with substantial long-term returns. The cost of inaction on climate change, dealing with extreme weather events, health impacts, ecosystem collapse, vastly outweighs the investment in subsidies. These subsidies accelerate cost reductions through economies of scale and learning by doing, as we've clearly seen with solar panels. Their costs plummeted, thanks in large part to initial deployment support. Regarding picking winners, we aren't necessarily backing obscure, untested ideas. We're supporting technologies like solar, wind, and EVs that are fundamentally necessary for decarbonization based on scientific consensus. While a carbon price is a valuable tool and should be part of the mix, it may not be sufficient on its own, or fast enough, especially for overcoming initial adoption barriers for capital-intensive technologies. Subsidies provide that direct push. Furthermore, the cost argument often ignores the billions in subsidies, both direct and indirect, that fossil fuels continue to receive globally, creating a tilted playing field that green tech subsidies help to level.
Mr. Chen, Dr. Hansen frames these subsidies as investments yielding returns in avoided climate damage, health savings, and job creation in new green industries. How do you weigh these potential benefits against the market distortions you highlighted?
While green jobs are created, we must also consider potential job losses in established industries and the overall net effect on employment, which is often complex to calculate. More fundamentally, the argument that the ends justify the means, that the climate goal justifies potentially inefficient policies, is dangerous from an economic standpoint. If subsidies lead to inefficient allocation of capital or prop up technologies that aren't truly viable long-term, That represents a real economic cost, regardless of the environmental benefits. Are we sure that the specific technologies being subsidized are truly the best long-term solution? Or are we locking ourselves into pathways that might be superseded by better innovations spurred by a more neutral policy like carbon pricing? The claim that subsidies dramatically lowered solar costs is also debated. Technological innovation and manufacturing scale-up in competitive global markets played huge roles, not just deployment subsidies in specific countries. My concern remains that subsidies encourage dependency. Industries receiving them often lobby intensely for their continuation, even after they may no longer be necessary or justified, creating long-term fiscal burdens. A carbon price, conversely, provides a consistent, predictable signal across the economy, encouraging all forms of emission reduction efficiently without the government needing to micromanage technological choices.
I must counter the point about dependency. Well-designed subsidies should indeed have phase-out mechanisms as technologies mature and become cost-competitive. The goal isn't perpetual support, but overcoming initial market failures and accelerating the transition. We needed that initial push for renewables, and we likely need it now for areas like green hydrogen or sustainable aviation fuel. Relying solely on a carbon price might also face political hurdles and could disproportionately affect lower-income households if not designed carefully with revenue recycling or rebates. Subsidies, targeted correctly, can sometimes offer a politically more feasible way to drive change quickly, especially when combined with regulations and standards. And regarding innovation, subsidies create demand, which pulls innovation forward. Companies invest more in R&D when they see a clear, supported market for their green products.
But the targeting is the difficult part. How do we ensure subsidies are targeted correctly and not captured by special interests? The political economy of subsidies is fraught with challenges. It often leads to rent-seeking behavior rather than pure innovation. Regarding equity, while carbon pricing needs careful design, the regressive nature of funding general subsidies through broad taxation to benefit specific, often wealthier, consumers of things like new EVs is also a significant equity concern that cannot be ignored. Ultimately, internalizing the cost of carbon creates the most level playing field for all emission reduction strategies to compete on their merits, fostering genuine, market-driven innovation rather than government-directed outcomes. In closing, let me reiterate my primary concerns regarding government subsidies for specific green technologies. While the objective of addressing climate change is paramount, the use of subsidies represents a significant departure from sound economic principles. They distort market signals, leading to potentially inefficient investments and hindering the discovery of the most cost-effective solutions through genuine market competition. The fiscal burden on taxpayers is substantial, diverting funds that could be used for other essential public services or broad-based research. Furthermore, the process of awarding subsidies is vulnerable to government failure, political influence, and lobbying, risking unfair advantages and potentially backing technologies that are not optimal in the long run. Questions of fairness also arise when subsidies disproportionately benefit certain groups while being funded by the broader public. We need climate action, but it should be smart, efficient, and market-oriented. Policies like a well-designed carbon price address the root problem, the externality of pollution, in a technology-neutral way, encouraging innovation across the board without the government picking winners. Let us pursue environmental goals with policies that are economically sound, fiscally responsible, and fair to all. Subsidies, in many cases, fall short on these criteria.
Thank you. To summarize, the urgency and scale of the climate crisis demand decisive action, and government subsidies are a proven and necessary tool in our arsenal. Relying solely on market forces, which have historically failed to account for environmental costs, is simply too slow and uncertain given the time frame we have. Subsidies directly address the market barriers facing essential green technologies, accelerating their deployment, driving down costs through scale, and speeding up our transition away from fossil fuels. We've seen their effectiveness in making renewables competitive, and they are vital now for electrifying transport and developing next-generation clean energy solutions. The benefits: reduced emissions, cleaner air, improved public health, enhanced energy security, and the creation of sustainable jobs and industries represent a massive return on investment for society. These are not just expenditures, they are strategic investments in our collective future, correcting existing market failures and leveling the playing field against entrenched fossil fuel interests. While carbon pricing has a role, subsidies provide the targeted push needed to overcome specific hurdles and ensure key technologies reach critical mass quickly. We have a responsibility to future generations to use all effective policy tools available. Strategically deployed subsidies are indispensable for building the sustainable, prosperous future we urgently need.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen and Mr. Chen, for this rigorous and enlightening debate on a complex issue. You've clearly articulated the central tension between targeted government intervention through subsidies to accelerate green technology adoption, and the arguments for relying on broader market mechanisms like carbon pricing for economic efficiency. We hope this discussion has provided valuable insights for our viewers. Thank you for watching.